strategy, I ask members opposite to actually listen to me. Do not dismiss me as someone who doesn't care about community safety. I have worked with both victims and perpetrators of crime for decades. I desperately want to build a safe Northern Territory for everyone, for every single Territorian, in every community, in every town. I know what violence does to families. I know the trauma that victims carry. I know the fear that grips communities when crime is out of control. But, Madam Speaker, I also know what works and what doesn't. And what I see in this strategy is a political document designed to sound tough, not a plan, an evidence-based plan, which it will actually make all of us safer. I rise today to express serious concerns about the CLP government's crime reduction strategy and their selective use of statistics to justify what is fundamentally a regressive and punitive approach that does fail to address the root causes of crime in our Northern Territory. The government has been quick to trumpet recent crime statistics, a 7.4% reduction in victims of crime, 14% overall crime reduction in Alice Springs, and these numbers sound impressive in a press release, but let's examine what they don't tell us. First, the government conveniently chooses short timeframes that suit their narrative. Comparing January to August 2025 with the same period 2024 ignores longer-term trends and seasonal variations. Any first-year criminology student knows that crime statistics must be analysed over extended periods to account for natural fluctuations. Cherry-picking favourable months is not evidence-based policy, it's political opportunism. Secondly, the strategy boasts about 4,587 adults denied bail, a 38% increase. But, Madam Speaker, is this success? We're warehousing more people in remand, often for minor offences at enormous cost to taxpayers. The average remand time may be 7% shorter, which is good news, but at 136.5 days, that's still over 4 months of incarceration without conviction. For many Territorians, that means losing jobs, housing and family connections, which are the very things that prevent reoffending. The strategy prioritises enforcement over evidence, lowering the age of criminal responsibility from 12 to 10 against the advice of the Australian Medical Association, the Law Council and every major child welfare organisation is not early intervention. It's criminalising children who need support, not punishment. The government's claiming that this ensures that young offenders get the help they need. But where is this help? The strategy is long on police powers and short on funded programs. The CLP has expanded the use of scanners, increased bail denials and criminalised public drinking, but where actually are the addiction treatment beds? Where is the youth mental health support? Where are the cultural healing programs for Aboriginal communities? The strategy acknowledges that crime has root causes, including problem drinking, school non-attendance, homelessness and housing shortages. Yet, the actual funded initiatives focus overwhelmingly on punishment for these experiences, not support to overcome them. Madam Speaker, it's like mopping the floor with the tap still running and calling it a flood prevention strategy. We know that Indigenous Territorians are vastly overrepresented in both our crime statistics and our prisons. The strategy mentions culturally appropriate approaches but provides no detail on meaningful consultation with Aboriginal community-controlled organisations or implementation of Aboriginal-led justice programs that have proved successful elsewhere. The government links crime reduction to economic growth, suggesting that reduced crime means improved safety, a better lifestyle and a stronger economy. We just heard those words in the chamber this morning. But they ignore the economic cost of this approach. Every person on remand is a cost to the system. Every child in detention is a tragedy that we will be paying for decades. Every dollar spent on enforcement is a dollar not invested in education, in housing or in health services that actually work to prevent crime. And Madam Speaker, while the government is spending record amounts on corrections, they've cut rehabilitation programs in jails due to overcrowding. Astoundingly, They've cut 60% of the very programs that might actually reduce reoffending because their own punitive policies have created such overcrowding that there's no room for rehabilitation. The Northern Territory has the highest recidivism rate in Australia, with 6 out of 10 prisoners returning to jail within 2 years of release. And what's the government's response? To cut the programs that might address this. Their own spokesperson admitted this approach may appear to place less emphasis on rehabilitation, but called it a necessary step. Necessary for what, Madam Speaker? For ensuring that people cycle endlessly through our prison system? Our Chief Minister herself acknowledged that added pressure on our correction system means that they've had to pull back on delivering some of that important rehabilitation, and that we have had to cease some programs of rehabilitation in prison because the demand of prison services is so high. So, Madam Speaker, their tough on crime approach has created such pressure that they cannot deliver rehabilitation, guaranteeing that people will reoffend and return to prison, creating more pressure, requiring more prisons in an endless, expensive, destructive cycle. Studies consistently show that every dollar invested in early childhood education returns $7 in reduced crime, health and welfare costs. Yet this strategy prioritises scanners, prioritises cells over classrooms and clinics, and now admits it cannot even deliver the rehabilitation programs that prisoners so desperately need. Madam Speaker, let me tell you what I don't see in this strategy. No targets for reducing Indigenous incarceration rates. No investment in alcohol and drug rehabilitation services proportionate to the problem. No commitment to addressing the chronic housing shortage in remote communities. No real plan to address the social determinants of crime, poverty, unemployment and trauma. No commitment to justice reinvestment, taking money from prisons and investing in communities to actually prevent crime in the first place. The strategy mentions measures of success, like a greater percentage of Territorians feel safe and people feel confident to report crime. These are important, but they're subjective measures that can be influenced by media coverage and political messaging rather than actually measuring safety improvements. We've got so much evidence from jurisdictions around the world that tells us what actually works to reduce crime. Stable housing, addiction treatment on demand, youth mentoring programs, community-led justice initiatives, and addressing intergenerational trauma. Let me give you concrete examples that work. In Glasgow in Scotland, they transformed themselves from the murder capital of Europe to one of the UK's safest cities, not through tougher policing, but by treating violence as a public health issue. The Violence Reduction Unit, established in 2005, took a radical approach when they saw violent young people not as criminals to be locked up, but as individuals experiencing trauma who needed intervention. They employed former gang members as navigators to mentor at-risk youths. They worked with hospitals to identify assault victims and offer support before cycles of retaliation could begin. They invested in education, in employment programs and in community development. And the result? Homicides fell by over 60% in a decade. Knife crime dropped dramatically. This was not achieved through harsher sentences or lowering the age of criminal responsibility. It was achieved through treating the disease, not just the symptoms. And in Baltimore, in Maryland, for decades, they pursued aggressive, tough-on-crime policing, high arrest rates, aggressive street stops, zero-tolerance approaches. And the result was some of the highest incarceration rates in America and persistently high crime. But when Baltimore invested in evidence-based violent interruption programs like Safe Streets, employing violence interrupters from the community to mediate conflicts before they escalate, the neighbourhoods with these programs saw significant reductions in violent crime. The lesson from Baltimore is clear. You cannot arrest your way out of a crime problem, especially when that crime is rooted in poverty, in unemployment and in community disconnection. And Madam Speaker, we don't need to look to Scotland or America for evidence. We have evidence right here in the Northern Territory, in Groote Island, which has achieved what can only be described as a transformation, with youth crime on the island plummeting by 95% between 2018 and 2022, from 346 offences to just 17. Overall offending has fallen 88%, from 1,041 offences to 130 in the last year. Burglaries dropped from 81 to just 2. And how did they achieve this? Not through lower ages of criminal responsibility, not through increased bail denials, not through more police powers. They achieved it through community-led justice initiatives, through a healing centre on country, through the Peacemaker program, where community members solve disputes through negotiation rather than police intervention, through youth mentoring programs that provide role models and real opportunities. The Andiliaqua Land Council Chair said that a reduction in crime reflects work in addressing the issues with a community-led approach that is right for our people. And on the Australian mainland, the Marungaku Justice Reinvestment Project in Bourke, New South Wales, reduced juvenile convictions by 46% and bail breaches by 72%, not through more police powers, but through community investment. The government cites monthly crime statistics as their measure of progress, but as any criminologist will tell you, reported crime statistics are influenced by policing practices, community confidence in reporting, and changing definitions of offences. The strategy itself acknowledges that the spike in Alice Springs crime was largely due to the violent crime reduction strategy, which resulted in more offences being recorded and counted. In other words, Madam Speaker, crime statistics can go up because we're detecting more crime, not because there's more crime occurring. The government can't have it both ways, claiming credit for reductions while ignoring that their own enforcement focus may affect future statistics. Because behind every statistic is a person. A disabled man who steals food because he's hungry. A young person who breaks into cars because they've dropped out of school and see no future. A woman who assaults someone while experiencing undiagnosed and untreated mental illness. A man who drinks to escape trauma and ends up in a cell instead of a treatment program. This strategy sees criminals. I see Territorians who need support. And now, because of this government's policies, these people are locked in overcrowded facilities where rehabilitation programs have been cancelled. They're being held in police watch houses not designed for long-term detention. And when they're released, they'll be more damaged, more traumatised, and more likely to reoffend than when they entered. That's not tough on crime, that's creating more crime. Madam Speaker, I am not arguing for being soft on crime. I'm arguing for being smart on crime. Glasgow and Baltimore show us clear, different paths. The Glasgow model of public health approach to violence is directly applicable to us here in the Northern Territory. Like Glasgow, we face entrenched cycles of violence, of substance abuse and community trauma. And like Glasgow, we need to see young offenders not simply as criminals, but as people who need pathways out of violence. That means adopting a public health approach to violence as Glasgow successfully implemented. Truly investing in proven early intervention programs for at-risk children and families. Employing community members, including those with lived experience of the justice system, as mentors and as navigators. Expanding drug and alcohol treatment services with culturally appropriate options. Supporting Aboriginal-led community justice programs that understand the local context. Establishing violence interruption programs in high-risk communities. Addressing the housing crisis that leaves so many homeless or in overcrowded conditions. Raising the age of criminal responsibility in line with international best practice. Implementing justice reinvestment programs that have been successful elsewhere. And using statistics honestly, long-term trends, per capita rates, and acknowledging their limitations. The Glasgow Violence Reduction Unit didn't just reduce crime, it transformed communities, created employment pathways, and gave young people hope and the whole community hope. That's what the Northern Territory needs, not more people locked up in detention. Madam Speaker, I'm tired of coming into this chamber and being attacked because I'm arguing for an approach that will actually work for all of us in the long term, that will keep all of us safer, that will stop us from causing harm that will damage us all in the long term, and that is based on what we know will work. Just like every single person in this chamber, I want to create a safe community for every single person in the Northern Territory, the people that we are all here to represent and all here to make law for. Real safety that is sustainable and that builds a future. not the illusion of safety that comes from tough-sounding press releases and rising prison numbers, not short-term political wins that create long-term social disasters. Madam Speaker, the CLP's crime reduction strategy is heavy on rhetoric and light on evidence. It offers short-term political wins through tough-on-crime posturing while ignoring the complex social factors that drive crime in our territory. The selective use of statistics may make for good press releases, but it does not make for good policy. Territorians deserve a government that has the courage to truly address root causes, not just symptoms, that actually follows evidence, doesn't say, I'm not interested in the evidence, that learns from places like Glasgow, that sees crime reduction not as a law enforcement problem alone, but as a whole of society challenge, requiring health, housing, education, and justice responses. Madam Speaker, when I advocate for rehabilitation programs, I'm not being soft on crime, I'm fighting for fewer victims. When I argue for raising the age of criminal responsibility, I'm not excusing bad behaviour, I'm preventing the creation of career criminals. When I push for investment in housing and addiction treatment, I'm not ignoring public safety, I'm working to build genuine lasting safety for every Territorian. Until this government commits to genuine prevention and rehabilitation backed by adequate funding and designed in partnership with local communities, this strategy will fail to deliver the safe, strong territory we all want. Madam Speaker, I urge everyone in this chamber to really consider the approach we are taking to trying to reduce crime and build a safe community for everyone in the Northern Territory, to engage in genuine consultation on evidence-based crime reduction strategies that address causes, not just consequences, to work together to build real safety, not just the appearance of it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.